I think Housemarque is redefining what a sequel can be with Saros, and as an enormous fan of Returnal, I could not be happier. And to be clear, Saros is not a sequel to Returnal, but it kind of is at the same time. And from what I can tell, it's going to be much more than just a part 2 of a great game. Not just because we have a new lead character, new story, new location, but because they've made it clear how this game is going to build upon what Returnal has already achieved. And this is a great time to look at Returnal. It's, I think, one of the best PlayStation games this gen. I would argue it's their most original game within their catalog of exclusives, which makes the anticipation for Saros even greater for me. I think one big change, however, versus Returnal should actually help this game have better reception this time around. Returnal was far more deserving of Game of the Year considerations the year that it came out, but a few issues prevented a lot of the review outlets from completing the game, and Saros looks to rectify that. So they're not just redefining what a sequel can be, they're setting their sights on a broader appeal and bigger notoriety. But before I get into the video, make sure you hit like and subscribe, and be sure to check out the live discussion that took place after this upload. So before we can talk about how Saros will redefine what a sequel can be and even elevate what Returnal did, we need to talk about why Returnal is such a great game. And there are 3 big categories here: the gameplay, the concept, and the story. So what makes the gameplay so great? Now keep in mind, I'm about to say all this as somebody who did not traditionally enjoy rogue games. And if you're not familiar with what a rogue game is, it typically just includes some sort of a die and start over mechanic. There are debates about what a roguelike is versus a roguelite, but for our purposes, you just need to know that I typically would turn my nose up to any game that had this type of a mechanic. And one of the core elements of Returnal is that if you die, you have to start all the way over. Now, there is a subtle means of progression in the game. It's not quite as obvious, but when you use, let's say, a particular weapon a bunch, the next time you find it, the perks will be stronger or more perks could be unlocked. And honestly, the risk of dying is really only part of what makes the gameplay so potent, because obviously fighting a boss is a little more intense when you know dying doesn't mean you just have to fight the boss again, but you have to start all the way over. There are other, I think, microcosmic elements of that feeling baked into the mechanics of the game. The adrenaline system, as an example, it motivates you to take no damage. The higher your adrenaline level gets from getting kills, the easier it becomes to use the active reload, and you get more currency from the enemies, and your melee damage increases. And once you get to level 5 of adrenaline, you get a little shield that you can get hit once and it won't reset your adrenaline right away. This is a brilliant way to subversively teach the player that faster and more reactive gameplay isn't just rewarded with survival, but it's rewarded with power, which is directly related to what makes Returnal's gameplay so good. It is probably the greatest third-person action game I have ever played with respect to moment-to-moment player volition. Your ability to move, jump, and dash for invincibility frames, it's just so fluid, so well built. It's hard to believe that a smaller and somewhat lesser-known team built this game. And when you combine this with firing your weapons, using your radar and spatial awareness to avoid damage, the game just soars with player empowerment. Now, all of this is accented and bolstered by the incredible visuals. Colorful bullet hell orbs, bright beams of light, and metaphorical waterfalls of projectiles cascade through the battlefield in an almost hypnotic way. It truly feels like a dream state fight for your life in the boss fights, and the giant bow on this pristine gameplay package is a soundtrack and a soundscape that is truly captivating. Every square inch of this game just oozes with quality and attention to detail. And I've not even talked about Celine's incredible voice actress, the ominous undertones and haunting edifices that loom above you, or the extra and free content and story that they added with the Tower of Sisyphus. So if that's the gameplay, and that's really a key part of this game and why it's so good, what makes the concept of the game so good? Honestly, the idea that your character is knowingly dying and then trying to get further and learn more, it's just so powerful. It honestly motivates you to get back up, dust yourself off, and try again. You feel like you are untangling a mystery with every audio log that you discover, every quick montage flash of strange footage, and the periodic injections of bizarre and yet seemingly meaningful story beats. For a game like this to work, you have to be invested in more than just the gameplay, and they expertly use the rogue concept to establish a link between you and the main character of Celine, which is related to the last huge element of what makes this game so great, the story. It's difficult to put into words why the Returnal story is so good, because they tell it in such a perplexing and breadcrumb-like way, and they also leave some of it open to user interpretation. And I have so much respect for this game that I don't want to spoil anything, so just know that they handle grief and trauma and the psychology of guilt in such a creative way that I still find myself sometimes thinking about what is really going on with Celine and her journey in Returnal. But sadly, a lot of this quality went unnoticed, and it made Returnal one of the single most underrated games of this generation. The term underrated is probably used too often, sort of like overrated. It can just sort of be an expression of bias. But in the case of Returnal, I think I can make a pretty good and a pretty strong case as to why this game was actually heavily underrated at launch. Well, why? Well, because I myself underrated it. If you go back and you read a lot of the reviews at the time that the game came out, you'll find a lot of praise for the gameplay, the art direction, and other elements that I've already discussed. But you will also find that a lot of the gaming press was unable to roll credits on the game. Biome 3 serves as a pretty big skill check even today, but at launch it was more like a cliff where a lot of players simply fell off, and I was one of those players. And it was pretty frustrating as an experience to enjoy a game so much, but the imbalance of the third biome, it just felt like an insurmountable summit. And thankfully, Housemarque agreed, and they rebalanced the third biome. More than likely, they were seeing the fail rates and the quit rates spiking around that particular place in the game, and not a lot of people were finishing. And the week after they pushed out that patch, I dove back in, I cleared Biome 3 on my first attempt, and the good thing about this is, once you get to Biome 4, it's sort of a checkpoint until you finish the game. You can run 4, 5, and 6 without starting all the way back over at 1. Even if you die, you will start back at Biome 4. So, I was once again hooked and back in Returnal, and my third or second try for Biome 4, I finally got to 5 and 6, and I cleared both of those on my first try, and my entire opinion of the game changed, and Returnal immediately became my game of the year for 2021. And I think you can see evidence of what I'm arguing here because the game was treated better over time. It won Game of the Year in the 2022 British Academy Game Awards, the BAFTAs, and it was given Best Action Game at the Game Awards 2021. So I hope Saros will reignite the public's interest in Returnal, and more than that, it seems as though Saros is going to redefine what a sequel can be. Sadly, in the gaming community and online discourse, game sequels have become a bit of a stigmatized topic. Big successful franchises reap the benefits of a good launch title by building and selling a sequel or the continuation of the franchise. But some fans think that they're tired of seeing sequels and they want new games. Horizon Forbidden West, God of War Ragnarok, Spider-Man 2, Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, Gran Turismo 7, and the list goes on. So when the Returnal devs said that they would not be making a sequel, I was a little torn. I was glad that the game could stand alone as a single and magnificently built piece of art, but it also felt like such a shame to leave behind an immaculately built action system. Well, if you look at Saros, Housemarque is refining what a sequel can be. I think it's somewhat adjacent to what Sucker Punch is doing with Ghost of Yotei, another game that I'm glad they're leaving behind the first story, and it's sort of like this closed book. But they're obviously taking the concept and they're treating it almost like a franchise. If you look at the trailer for Saros, the dialogue about coming back stronger, the gun, the character's outfit, the larger-than-life enemy, the swirling balls, the spiraling effect, hellish barrage in the reflection of his eye, you can just sense that this is a spiritual sequel to Returnal, but without all the baggage and the troubles of a true sequel. You can create an entirely new story, a new power fantasy. You can reset the player experience, and you don't really have to explain why. And based on what they've said, they're going to elevate and even build on everything that they've already built. If you haven't checked out the PlayStation blog about Saros, you may have missed a few key details. First, they make it clear that Returnal will stand on its own, but they stress that they wanted to evolve what they call their deep third-person action and mysterious storytelling. And it's very clear from how they describe the game that it will be very similar to Returnal. Just listen to this. Saros is an action game with the haunting story of a lost off-world colony on Carcosa under the ominous eclipse. You play as Arjun Devraj, a powerful Soltari Enforcer who will stop at nothing to find who he is looking for. Our goal is to create an emotional and powerful character study that explores the cost it takes to create a new future. Now, you can already sense the focus of this has a lot of gravity to what he is doing. He's willingly dying and starting over and getting stronger to find somebody and to create a new future. Now, I could even see them using this story element to establish why, even after you get a successful run or you beat the game or roll credits, that completion just means you gotta continue sacrificing yourself in order to maintain this new future, which is why you would just continue to do runs even after that. But I think they plan to elevate this game and make it more broadly appealing than Returnal. A lot of fans and review outlets, they were just not very appreciative of the die and start over mechanic in Returnal, and Saros aims to soften that mechanic in one particular way. Here's what they say. A key gameplay distinction between Saros and Returnal is permanent resources and progression, making every death valuable. After every death, you will face a changed world, but in Saros, you'll be able to choose and permanently upgrade your loadout from an evolving set of weapons and suit upgrades to come back stronger to overcome the challenges you face on Carcosa. Now, this should create a linear undercurrent for every player. You're not just dying and then trying again, you're dying and then investing into your strength and your abilities to do a complete run. They also say that you're going to face a changed world. Now, this could be hinting at another way they plan to elevate the game. Returnal uses pre-made set pieces, and then it changes how they connect and the order that they show up, and then the enemies are always a little bit random in those particular places. So it's a blend of handcrafted environments, some RNG, as well as procedural tech. Now, Saros sounds like it's taking a different approach, and I can't wait to see what they come up with, because as far as I can tell, they're not just making another game. As I've said, this is a sequel redefined. But those are just my thoughts, and I would love to hear your thoughts below. As always, we go to a live stream after this. It hits a card right here, and then I'll have a link below to that so you can come and discuss this with me live. And as always, if you like this video, please remember to hit like, share, and subscribe.